Hi everyone, my name is Hannah Whitfield. I'm 28 years old, and for most of my life, I was the grandchild nobody talked about at family dinners. Until 18 months ago, when my grandmother did something so quiet, so unassuming, that none of us understood what it actually was.
She handed each of her 5 grandchildren an envelope with $1,000 in cash. No instructions, no conditions. Just a small, tired smile and the words, "Do whatever feels right to you." We thought it was a sweet, sentimental gesture from a woman who was running out of time. We had no idea it was a test. And only one of us passed. I'm going to tell you exactly what happened. From the day she handed us those envelopes, to the day her will was read, to the confrontation that followed, because honestly, some of you are going to recognize your own families in this story. And if you do, I want you to stay until the end, because the ending is the part that made me finally understand my grandmother and myself. Before I go further, let me ask you something. If someone in your family gave you $1,000 with 0 instructions, no strings, no explanation, what would you have done with it? Hold that thought. Because your answer might say more about you than you think. Part 1. The family. To understand what happened, you need to understand my family first. We're the Whitfields, a big, loud, image-obsessed family from a suburb outside Columbus, Ohio. My grandmother, Eleanor Whitfield, was the last surviving matriarch. My grandfather died when I was 12, and after that, Eleanor became the center of gravity for all of us. Every holiday happened at her house. Every argument eventually looped back to her opinion. Every grandchild wanted, in some quiet, competitive way, to be her favorite. There were 5 of us grandchildren. My cousin Brooke, the oldest, was 31, a real estate agent who posted her life like it was a highlight reel. Brunches, boutique hotels, luxury handbags she couldn't quite afford. Then came Tyler, 29, who worked in business development, which meant he changed jobs every 8 months and always had a new business idea he needed funding for. Then me, Hannah, 28. I worked as a data analyst at a mid-sized insurance company, quiet, unremarkable by family standards. Then my younger cousins, twins Chloe and Mason, both 24, fresh out of college and already deep into the same performative lifestyle Brooke had perfected. I want to be honest with you, I was never the favorite. I wasn't loud enough, pretty enough, funny enough, or successful-looking enough to earn the kind of attention my cousins got. At family gatherings, I was the one refilling drinks in the kitchen, while everyone else held court in the living room. My Aunt Diane, Brooke and Tyler's mother, used to introduce me to guests as, "And this is Hannah, she's quiet," like quiet was a diagnosis. For years, I told myself it didn't matter. That family dynamics like this exist everywhere, and you just learn to live in the corner they give you. But my grandmother, Eleanor, never treated me like a corner. She was the only person in that family who ever really looked at me, not through me, not past me to whoever was more interesting. Just at me. When I was 7 years old, she caught me giving my allowance to a school friend whose family was struggling, and instead of scolding me for wasting money, she knelt down, looked me directly in the eyes, and said something I never forgot. "You have a good heart, Hannah. Don't let this family talk you out of it." I didn't understand what she meant back then. I do now. Part 2, the diagnosis. When I was 26, Eleanor was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Stage 3. The doctors gave her 12 to 18 months, and true to her nature, she didn't cry, didn't panic, didn't ask why me. She simply said, "Well, I suppose I should get my affairs in order," and went back to her garden. That's when the family changed, not softened, sharpened. Suddenly everyone wanted to be at Eleanor's house every weekend. Suddenly Brooke was just stopping by to check on Grandma 3 times a week. Suddenly Tyler was calling her, just to chat, which somehow always ended with him mentioning a business opportunity. He was so close to launching if only he had a little capital. I watched my family circle my dying grandmother like she was a resource to be extracted before it ran out, and it made me sick. Not because I didn't understand grief-driven anxiety about legacy, I understood it perfectly. What made me sick was how thin the mask was. Nobody was hiding it well. Eleanor certainly wasn't fooled. One afternoon, I was in her kitchen making her tea, and she said quietly, almost to herself, "They think I don't see it." I didn't ask what she meant. I already knew. If you've ever watched people you love turn into strangers the moment money enters the room, you already know exactly where this story is going. Stay with me because it gets worse before it gets better. Part 3. The envelope's 10 months into her illness. On a Sunday in March, Eleanor called all 5 of us to her house. No explanation given beforehand, just a text from Aunt Diane that said, "Grandma wants everyone here Sunday at 2, don't be late." We all showed up, curious, a little tense. Eleanor was thinner than the last time I'd seen her, her silver hair thinning too, but her eyes were as sharp as ever. She sat in her armchair, the same one she'd sat in my entire childhood, and asked us to sit in a circle around her, like we were children again waiting for a story. Then she pulled out 5 identical white envelopes from the side table drawer. "I want to give each of you something," she said, her voice steady despite how frail she looked. $1,000. Cash, no conditions. Brooke's eyebrows shot up. Tyler actually laughed out loud, delighted. Chloe and Mason exchanged an excited look. I just sat there, quiet, watching Eleanor's face, because something about the way she said, "no conditions," felt like exactly the opposite of what she meant. "What's it for?" Tyler asked, already reaching for his envelope. Eleanor smiled, the kind of smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Whatever feels right to you," she said. "That's all I'll say." Aunt Diane, sitting off to the side, clapped her hands together. "Mom, this is so generous." "Kids, what do you say?" A chorus of "thank you, Grandma"s followed, half genuine, half performative. Eleanor nodded, distributed the envelopes one by one, and when she got to me, she held onto my envelope just a second longer than the others, looked at me, and said quietly, just for me to hear, "I already know what you'll do with it, Hannah. I just want to see if I'm right." I felt my stomach drop. I didn't understand what she meant, not fully, not yet, but I understood enough to know this wasn't really about the money. If you've ever had someone look at you like they could read your whole future in one glance, you know exactly the feeling I'm describing. It's unsettling. It's also, somehow, comforting, because someone finally sees you. Part 4. What they did with it. I need to walk you through exactly what happened over the following weeks, because this is where the story really splits into 2 paths, theirs and mine. Brooke posted a picture within 48 hours. A spa weekend in Asheville with 2 of her girlfriends, champagne glasses raised. Captioned, "Grandma's love language is generosity, blessed." The trip cost $1,400. She'd added $400 of her own credit card debt to cover the difference. Tyler used his to invest in a friend's cryptocurrency scheme that he swore was about to blow up. Within 6 weeks, the coin had crashed 80%. He didn't tell anyone. I only found out because Chloe mentioned it at Thanksgiving, laughing about how Tyler's crypto thing tanked again. Chloe and Mason, the twins, split the money on matching designer jackets and a weekend trip to Miami with friends. Their Instagram stories were a highlight reel of poolside selfies and cocktail glasses, captioned things like, "Living my best life," and "Grandma's blessing." None of them were cruel people. Not exactly. They were just exactly what this family had trained them to be: performance over substance, appearance over meaning. And I don't say that with total superiority, because for years, I'd wondered if I was just too scared to be like them, too afraid of judgment to actually enjoy my life the way they did. But watching them spend that money, something in me just clicked into place. I understood, finally, what my grandmother had been asking without asking. Here's what I did with mine, and I promise I'm not telling you this to sound like the hero of my own story, because at the time, I didn't think of it that way at all. I thought of it as just being honest with myself. I took $600 of the $1,000 and put it into a high-yield savings account, the beginning of an emergency fund I'd never had the discipline to start. I took $200 and donated it to a local literacy nonprofit that had helped me as a kid, the same organization, actually, that had helped that school friend I'd given my allowance to when I was 7. And I took the last $200 and used it to take my grandmother, my actual grandmother, not a spa trip, not a Miami weekend, out to her favorite restaurant. The one she and my grandfather used to go to every anniversary, a quiet little Italian place downtown that had somehow survived 30 years of Columbus real estate turnover. We sat there for 3 hours. She told me stories about my grandfather I'd never heard, how they met at a bowling alley, how he proposed with a ring he couldn't afford and had to pay off over 8 months, how her own mother had disowned her for a decade over a disagreement about money that Alina never fully explained. At the end of that dinner, I did something I hadn't planned. I wrote her a letter, a real, handwritten letter, and mailed it to her a week later. In it, I told her what that $1,000 had taught me. That money isn't a reward, it's a responsibility. That the version of success my family chased, the vacations, the image, the performance, had never actually made anyone in this family happy, not really, not underneath. That she was the only person who had ever made me feel like being quiet wasn't a flaw to be fixed. I never got a response to that letter. I assumed she'd read it, smiled, and moved on. I had no idea what she actually did with it. Part 5. The decline over the following year, Alina's health worsened. The family dynamic around her sickened further. 2 visits became shorter, more transactional, thinly veiled check-ins on how she was doing that were really check-ins on how much time was left. I want to pause here and ask you something, because I think about this a lot. Have you ever watched people you love perform grief before the person has even died? It's one of the strangest, most disturbing things I've experienced. Brooke started talking about when Grandma's gone in future tense. Planning renovations to her own house she'd apparently always wanted. Using language that made it sound like Alina's death was a real estate transaction pending closing. Tyler, still reeling from his crypto losses, started dropping comments about the house, Alina's house. A beautiful 4-bedroom colonial she and my grandfather had bought in 1985 and paid off years ago. Worth, by our estimate, somewhere around $480,000 in the current market. He'd say things like, "Someone's going to have to decide what happens to the house eventually," in a tone that made it very clear he had opinions about who that someone should be. I never talked about the house. I never talked about money at all, actually. I just kept visiting Alina every other weekend, sometimes bringing groceries, sometimes just sitting with her while she watched her old game shows. Sometimes doing nothing more than holding her hand while she slept in her armchair. I wasn't doing it strategically. I want to be clear about that. I wasn't performing devotion for a payout. I was doing it because she was the only person in my family who had ever made me feel like I mattered exactly as I was. If you've ever loved someone who was dying, you know that the small, boring moments, the sitting, the silence, the holding hands, become the most important moments of your entire life. Everything else falls away. Only presence matters. Alina passed away on a quiet Tuesday morning in October, 18 months after she handed us those envelopes. I was not there when she died, my Aunt Diane was, and I've made peace with that, though it took time. What I do know is that in her final weeks, she spent hours with her attorney, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Patricia Hale, going over something she described only as making sure things are done right. None of us knew what that meant. We would find out 3 weeks later, at the reading of her will. Part 6, the reading. I need you to picture the room because the details matter. Patricia Hale's office was small, wood-paneled, the kind of place that smelled like old paper and coffee. All 5 grandchildren were there, along with Aunt Deanne, my mother Carol, Alina's other daughter, and my Uncle Rob, Tyler and Chloe's father. Everyone was dressed like they were attending a business meeting, not a family gathering. Brooke had her hair done. Tyler kept checking his phone. There was a tension in that room that had nothing to do with grief and everything to do with expectation. Patricia opened a folder, cleared her throat, and began reading. The first parts were standard, small personal items distributed among family members, a modest donation to Aliner's church, some jewelry designated for my mother and Aunt Diane. Then Patricia paused, looked up at the room, and said something that changed the entire temperature of the space. Before I continue to the primary asset distribution, Aliner left a personal note she asked me to read aloud. She unfolded a single piece of paper and began reading in Aliner's own words. Transcribed from what Patricia said were several conversations they'd had over her final months. To my 5 grandchildren, 18 months ago, I gave each of you $1,000 with no instructions, because I wanted to see, honestly and without pretense, who you were when you thought no one was watching closely. I want you to know I was watching, not to judge you, though I understand how that sounds, but because I am your grandmother and grandmother's watch. The room went very still. I saw the vacations. I saw the investments. I saw the trip to Miami. None of that makes any of you bad people. You are all products of a family, my family, that taught you worth is measured in appearance. I take responsibility for some of that. I was not always the mother or grandmother I should have been about these things. I remember glancing at Brooke, whose face had gone pale. Tyler was staring at the floor. But I also saw one of you do something different. I saw one of you save, give, and reflect. I saw one of you write me a letter that I have kept in my nightstand drawer since the day I received it, and that I have read more times than I can count. I felt my chest tighten. I hadn't told anyone about that letter. I knew who that grandchild was when she was 7 years old, giving away her allowance to a friend in need, while everyone else told her she was foolish for it. I have known for 21 years. I was simply waiting to see if the world would beat that goodness out of her, the way it beats it out of so many people. It did not. Patricia paused, looked around the room, and then continued reading. Because of this, I am leaving my home, the property at 1420 Elmwood Drive, along with its full contents and the remaining balance of my estate after debts and specific bequests are paid. To my granddaughter, Hannah Whitfield. Part 7, The Fallout. I wish I could tell you the room reacted with grace. It did not. Brooke was the first to speak, her voice sharp and disbelieving. That has to be a mistake. That's not. Hannah didn't even do anything special. She just what? My mother interrupted, and I remember being surprised because my mother rarely spoke up in family conflicts. She just visited her grandmother every other weekend for 18 months while the rest of you visited when it was convenient. Tyler leaned forward, his jaw tight. This isn't fair. We all got the same envelope. We all had the same chance. You did, Patricia said calmly, still holding the folder. What you did with that chance was entirely up to you. Aliner was very clear that this was never about punishing anyone. It was about recognizing something she'd seen for over 2 decades. Aunt Diane's voice cracked with something between grief and outrage. This is insane. She can't have possibly meant to leave everything to Hannah based on, what, a diary entry? A letter. This family built that house together. We all have memories there. I want to be honest, sitting in that room, hearing my own family talk about me like I wasn't there. Like winning my grandmother's love through decades of genuine connection was somehow a scheme, was one of the most painful moments of my life. Part of me wanted to give it all away right then, just to make the discomfort stop. That impulse, the desire to shrink myself back down to the quiet one who doesn't cause problems, was so strong I could feel it in my chest like a physical weight. But then I thought about Aliner's face when she handed me that envelope. I already know what you'll do with it, Hannah. I just want to see if I'm right. She'd been right. And I wasn't going to prove her wrong now by disappearing again. I didn't ask for this, I said quietly, my voice shaking but steady enough to be heard. I didn't even know about the letter being kept. I just loved her, that's all I did, Brooke scoffed. That's convenient. Patricia cleared her throat and interjected before things escalated further. I anticipated this reaction, actually. Aliner did too. Which is why there's an additional provision in the will regarding legal challenges. That got everyone's attention. Part 8. The challenge. 2 weeks later, Brooke and Tyler joined, somewhat reluctantly, by Aunt Diane, filed a legal challenge against the will, arguing undue influence. Their claim was that Alina had been manipulated in her final, weakened months, that a woman in declining cognitive and physical health couldn't have made such a significant decision rationally, and that I had somehow orchestrated the entire outcome through calculated visits and a strategically written letter. I won't lie to you, those months were some of the hardest of my life. Being accused, formally, in legal documents, of manipulating a dying woman I loved more than almost anyone, broke something in me. I stopped sleeping well. I lost weight I didn't have to lose. I questioned, over and over, whether I should just walk away from the inheritance entirely, just to make the accusations stop, just to get my family back, even though, if I'm honest with myself, that family had never really been mine in the way I wanted it to be. If you've ever been punished for doing the right thing, quietly and without expecting anything in return, you know exactly the kind of exhaustion I'm describing. It's a specific kind of loneliness, being accused of scheming when all you did was show up. But Alina, it turned out, had thought of this too. Patricia requested a hearing and brought forward documentation Alina had prepared with her months before her death, recorded conversations, dated and notarized, in which Alina discussed her reasoning at length, discussed her full mental competency assessments from 2 independent physicians, and explicitly predicted, almost word for word, the exact challenge her family would bring. In one recording, played in front of a judge, Alina's voice, tired but completely lucid, said this: "I expect Brooke and Tyler, and possibly Diane, to challenge this decision. I want it on record that I am of sound mind, that I have consulted 2 physicians who will confirm this, and that my decision is not the product of manipulation, but of 21 years of quiet observation. I have watched Hannah her entire life. She did not know she was being watched. That is precisely why I trust the outcome." The judge dismissed the challenge within 6 weeks, citing the extensive documentation, the medical evaluations, and the notarized, dated recordings that preempted the exact argument the family had made. Patricia later told me, privately, that in 22 years of practicing estate law, she had never seen a client prepare so thoroughly for the exact conflict that would follow her own death. "She knew your family," Patricia said to me, not unkindly, "better than they knew themselves." Part 9, what came after I want to tell you the ending felt purely satisfying. Like a movie where the villains get punished and the hero rides off into the sunset. It didn't, not entirely. Grief doesn't work that cleanly, and neither does family. Brooke and I haven't spoken since the hearing. Tyler sent one bitter text message: "Hope the house was worth losing your family over," that I've chosen not to respond to because the truth is, I didn't lose a family. I lost the illusion of one. Aunt Diane, to her credit, eventually reached out, months later, and admitted in her own guarded way that she'd been harder on me than I deserved over the years. "We're not close, but we're speaking again, carefully, like 2 people testing ice they're not sure will hold. My mother and I have never been closer." She told me something after the hearing that I still think about constantly. "I always saw what you had in you, Hannah. I just didn't have the courage your grandmother had to say it out loud. I still live in Alina's house on Elmwood Drive. I kept her armchair. I kept her garden, though I'll admit I'm not nearly as good with the roses as she was. Some nights, I sit in that chair with a cup of tea, and I think about the version of myself who almost gave the inheritance away just to avoid conflict. Just to shrink back into the quiet corner my family had built for me. I'm grateful every single day that I didn't. Here's what I want to leave you with, because I think it matters more than the house, more than the money, more than the family drama. My grandmother didn't give me $1,000 to test my financial discipline. She gave it to me to test who I was when no one was applauding. My cousins spent theirs performing a life for an audience. I spent mine quietly building one, without realizing anyone was watching. That's the part I keep coming back to. Character isn't what you do when everyone's watching. It's what you do when you're certain no one is. Alina watched anyway, for 21 years. Quietly, patiently, without ever once telling me she was paying attention. If there's someone in your life who sees you like that, who watches quietly, who believes in you before you believe in yourself, I hope you tell them while you still can. I never got the chance to tell Alina that her belief in me was the reason I survived a family that never quite knew what to do with someone like me. So let me ask you the same question I asked at the beginning, and this time, I want you to really think about it. If someone in your life handed you $1,000 tomorrow, with no rules, no explanation, no expectations, what would it reveal about who you really are, underneath all the performance? I already know my answer. I found out the hard way that my grandmother knew it before I did. Thank you for listening to my story. If this reminded you of your own family, or if you've ever felt like the quiet one who never got credit for showing up, I'd genuinely love to hear about it. Sometimes the people who love us best are the ones watching from the corner of the room, saying nothing, until the moment it matters most.